The autumn rain drummed against the glass windows of the upscale restaurant on Griswold Street, casting shifting shadows across the burgundy leather banquettes and crystal stemware that caught the warm amber light from the chandeliers above. Isabella Foster sat alone at table 12, her manicured fingers wrapped around the stem of an untouched glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. Her dark eyes fixed on the entrance with growing irritation. The reservation had been set for 7 o'clock sharp, and now the hands of her vintage Cartier watch pointed accusingly past 7:15. She had chosen this particular establishment deliberately, a place where the city's business elite gathered to discuss mergers and acquisitions over plates of seared duck breast and conversations conducted in hushed, reverent tones. The linen tablecloth beneath her hands was pristine white, pressed to perfection, and the silverware gleamed under the soft lighting that made everyone look successful and important. Tonight was supposed to be different, a celebration of sorts, though Isabella herself wasn't entirely certain what exactly they were celebrating. The call from her father had come that morning, his voice crackling through the phone with barely contained excitement, as he explained that the partnership structure of Foster and Associates was about to change dramatically. There would be a new partner joining the firm, someone whose background and qualifications had apparently impressed the senior partners enough to fast-track an unprecedented promotion. The details had been frustratingly vague, but her father had insisted that this dinner meeting was crucial, that Isabella needed to be present to welcome their new business associate properly. Isabella adjusted the collar of her charcoal grey blazer and glanced around the restaurant's interior, noting the way other diners leaned across their tables in animated conversation, their voices creating a gentle murmur that mixed with the soft jazz playing from speakers hidden somewhere in the coffered ceiling. She had dressed carefully for this evening, selecting a conservative but elegant ensemble that conveyed both professionalism and authority. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and she wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, small touches that made her feel grounded and confident. The waitstaff moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, their black uniforms crisp and their movements choreographed to avoid disturbing the intimate atmosphere that made this restaurant a favorite among Detroit's power brokers. Isabella watched a young server approach a nearby table, balancing a tray of appetizers with the kind of grace that came from years of experience in high-end establishments. The sight reminded her of her own early days in the business world, when every interaction felt like a test and every opportunity seemed to carry the weight of her entire future. Her thoughts drifted to the morning's conversation with her father, replaying his words and trying to decipher the undertones she had detected in his voice. Harrison Foster was not a man given to spontaneous decisions, and his enthusiasm about this new partnership struck her as unusual. The firm had been operating successfully with its current structure for nearly 2 decades, and Isabella had always assumed that when changes came, they would be gradual and carefully planned. This sudden introduction of a new partner suggested something more urgent, perhaps a response to market pressures or opportunities that she hadn't fully grasped. The sound of the restaurant's front door opening drew her attention, and she looked up expectantly, prepared to finally meet this mysterious new colleague who had somehow earned her father's confidence and respect. Instead, she saw a young couple being seated at a table near the windows, their obvious nervousness and careful attention to the menu prices marking them as occasional visitors rather than regulars. Isabella felt a familiar pang of empathy, remembering her own first visits to places like this, when the prices seemed astronomical and she worried constantly about committing some unforgivable breach of etiquette. 20 minutes late now, and still no sign of her dinner companion. Isabella reached for her phone, considering whether to send a text message or simply call to inquire about the delay. The screen showed no missed calls or messages, which only added to her growing frustration. In her world, punctuality was not merely a courtesy, but a fundamental sign of respect and professionalism. Being late to a business dinner sent a message about priorities and reliability, and Isabella found herself wondering what kind of first impression this new partner intended to make. The restaurant's sommelier approached her table with a deferential nod, his practiced eye taking in her untouched wine and the empty chair across from her. He inquired politely whether she might like to order an appetizer while she waited, his voice pitched low enough to avoid drawing attention from nearby diners. Isabella declined with a gracious smile, explaining that she preferred to wait for her companion, though privately she was beginning to doubt whether anyone would actually appear. She allowed her gaze to wander across the restaurant's elegant interior, taking in the oil paintings that adorned the walls and the fresh flower arrangements that sat atop each table like small explosions of color against the muted palette of cream and burgundy that dominated the space. This was the kind of establishment where deals were struck and careers were made, where handshakes carried more weight than contracts, and where the right introduction could open doors that might otherwise remain forever closed. The memory of her own introduction to this world came flooding back as she sat there, remembering the nervous energy she had felt during her first business dinner nearly a decade earlier. She'd been fresh out of law school then, armed with academic knowledge, but lacking the practical experience that only came from navigating the complex social dynamics of professional relationships. Her father had been patient but demanding, teaching her that success in business required not only technical competence, but also the ability to read people, to understand motivations and concerns that were rarely spoken aloud. A burst of laughter from a corner table briefly interrupted her reverie, and Isabella turned to see a group of 4 men in expensive suits raising their glasses in what appeared to be a toast. Their faces were flushed with success and good wine, and their body language suggested the kind of camaraderie that developed between colleagues who had weathered challenges together. She envied them that easy familiarity, the way they could communicate with glances and gestures that spoke of shared experiences and mutual trust. Her own professional relationships had always felt more complicated, weighted down by expectations and assumptions about her role in the family firm. Despite her qualifications and achievements, Isabella often sensed that colleagues and clients saw her primarily as Harrison Foster's daughter, rather than as an accomplished attorney in her own right. She had worked tirelessly to prove herself, taking on the most challenging cases and working longer hours than anyone else, but the perception persisted that her success was somehow inherited rather than earned. The arrival of this new partner represented both an opportunity and a potential threat. On one hand, having fresh perspectives and additional expertise could strengthen the firm and open new avenues for growth. On the other hand, Isabella couldn't help but worry about how this change might affect her own position and future prospects. Would this new colleague respect her contributions and treat her as an equal, or would she find herself having to prove her worth all over again? 25 minutes late now, and Isabella's patience was wearing thin. She signaled to their server, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the sort of professional demeanor that put nervous diners at ease. The server approached with a sympathetic expression, clearly having noted the empty chair and untouched place setting across from Isabella. Without being asked, she offered to hold the table for a few more minutes or to contact the restaurant's host stand to inquire about any messages that might have been left. Isabella thanked her, but declined both offers, explaining that she would wait a bit longer before making any decisions about the evening's plans. The server nodded understandingly and retreated, leaving Isabella alone with her thoughts and her growing certainty that something had gone wrong with the evening's arrangements. Perhaps there had been a miscommunication about the time or location, or maybe some emergency had arisen that prevented her dinner companion from arriving as scheduled. The soft lighting in the restaurant created an intimate atmosphere that made conversations feel private, even in the midst of a crowded dining room. Isabella found herself listening to the gentle murmur of voices around her, catching fragments of discussions about quarterly earnings and market projections, about vacation plans and family obligations, about the kinds of everyday concerns that filled the lives of successful professionals. There was something comforting about being surrounded by these familiar rhythms, even as she sat alone at her table. Her phone buzzed softly against the table, and Isabella reached for it eagerly, hoping for some explanation or apology from her missing companion. Instead, she found a text message from her father, asking simply whether the dinner was going well and whether she had been favorably impressed by their new partner. The message filled her with fresh irritation, confirming that the meeting was indeed supposed to be happening, but providing no insight into why it wasn't. She typed a careful response, explaining that her dinner companion had not yet arrived and asking whether her father had any additional contact information that might help resolve the situation. The message felt diplomatic and professional, concealing her growing frustration behind language that wouldn't cause unnecessary alarm or embarrassment for anyone involved. Within moments, her phone buzzed again with her father's reply, expressing surprise and concern and promising to make some inquiries on his end. 30 minutes late now, and Isabella was seriously considering whether to abandon the evening entirely. She had other work she could be doing, contracts to review and briefs to prepare, and sitting alone in an expensive restaurant was beginning to feel like an exercise in futility. Yet something held her in place. Perhaps curiosity about this mysterious new partner, or maybe just stubborn determination not to let the evening be a complete waste. The restaurant's atmosphere remained unchanged around her, the soft jazz continuing to play and the servers continuing their graceful dance between tables. But Isabella felt increasingly disconnected from the warm ambiance that had initially appealed to her. She found herself studying the other diners more critically, noting the way they seemed so comfortable in their element, so certain of their place in the world. Had she ever felt that kind of confidence, or was she always performing, always conscious of being watched and evaluated? A memory surfaced unbidden, taking her back to a similar restaurant 3 years earlier, when she had been waiting for a client who ultimately decided not to hire the firm. She had sat alone then too, feeling the weight of professional disappointment and personal frustration, wondering whether she was truly cut out for the high-stakes world of corporate law. The client had eventually called to explain that they had decided to go with a larger firm, one with more resources and a longer track record, and Isabella had spent the drive home questioning every decision that had led her to that moment. But she had persevered, as she always did, channeling her disappointment into determination and using each setback as motivation to work harder and smarter. The next client had been different, a small manufacturing company that appreciated her attention to detail and personal approach, and that successful representation had led to others. Building a practice required patience and resilience, qualities that Isabella had developed through necessity and refined through experience. The sound of the front door opening again caught her attention, and this time she saw a familiar figure entering the restaurant. Marcus Webb, a senior partner at a competing firm, spotted her immediately and approached her table with a surprised but pleased expression. He inquired about her evening and whether she was dining alone, his tone suggesting both genuine interest and professional curiosity about what might bring her to this particular establishment on a Tuesday night. Isabella explained briefly that she was waiting for a business associate who appeared to be running late, and Marcus nodded sympathetically, sharing his own stories of clients and colleagues who seemed to operate on their own unique understanding of time. He mentioned that he was meeting his wife for their wedding anniversary dinner, and Isabella congratulated him warmly, remembering the elegant woman she had met at various professional events over the years. Their brief conversation was pleasant but superficial, the kind of polite interaction that characterized most professional relationships in their field. Marcus excused himself to join his wife at their table, but not before suggesting that Isabella should consider joining their firm if she ever decided to make a change. The comment was delivered lightly, almost as a joke, but Isabella detected an underlying seriousness that made her wonder whether there had been discussions about her among the city's legal community. 35 minutes late, and Isabella's resolve was beginning to crumble. She had already endured the subtle glances from other diners and the concerned attention of the restaurant staff, and her pride was starting to feel bruised by the apparent abandonment. Perhaps this new partner was sending a message about priorities and power dynamics, establishing from the very beginning that he considered himself the senior member of their professional relationship. The thought sparked a familiar anger in Isabella, the same fury that had sustained her through law school challenges and early career obstacles. She refused to be dismissed or disrespected, regardless of this person's qualifications or her father's enthusiasm about their potential contribution to the firm. If he couldn't be bothered to show up on time for their first meeting, what did that suggest about his attitude toward future collaborations and responsibilities? Her phone remained silent, despite her increasingly frequent glances at the screen, offering no explanations or apologies for the evening's delays. Isabella began to consider her options, weighing the professional implications of leaving against the personal cost of continuing to wait. In some ways, staying felt like accepting disrespect, while leaving might be interpreted as impatience or inflexibility. Neither option appealed to her, but the status quo was becoming increasingly untenable. The restaurant's environment continued its elegant rhythm around her, seemingly oblivious to her growing discomfort. A server refilled her water glass with practiced efficiency, and the sommelier made another discreet inquiry about whether she might like to order something while she waited. Isabella appreciated their professionalism, but felt increasingly conspicuous as the only solo diner who appeared to be waiting for someone who might never arrive. A couple at the next table was deep in animated conversation about a recent vacation to Italy, their voices filled with enthusiasm as they shared memories of museums visited and meals savored. Their obvious happiness and connection made Isabella acutely aware of her own solitude, not just in this moment, but more broadly in her life. Work had consumed so much of her time and energy over the past few years that personal relationships had become increasingly rare and superficial. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was sitting alone in a restaurant known for business dinners, waiting for a professional colleague who might become an important part of her career trajectory. Even her social life had become subordinated to professional considerations, filtered through the lens of networking opportunities and career advancement. She wondered sometimes whether she had lost sight of other possibilities, whether her single-minded focus on professional success had come at the cost of personal fulfillment. 40 minutes late now, and Isabella felt her anger crystallizing into cold determination. When this person finally appeared, if they appeared at all, she would make it clear that such disrespect was unacceptable and would not be tolerated in future dealings. Professional relationships required mutual respect and consideration, and she refused to set a precedent that her time and schedule were somehow less valuable than anyone else's. The front door opened once more, and Isabella looked up with a mixture of hope and frustration, prepared to deliver the speech she had been mentally rehearsing for the past 10 minutes. Instead, she saw the restaurant's maintenance staff entering through a service entrance she hadn't previously noticed, their uniforms marking them as employees rather than patrons. The sight reminded her of the invisible army of workers who made establishments like this function smoothly, people whose contributions were essential but often unacknowledged by the clientele they served. Her thoughts turned briefly to her own relationship with the support staff at Foster & Associates, particularly the cleaning crew that arrived each evening after the lawyers and paralegals had gone home. She made an effort to acknowledge them when their schedules overlapped, but she realized that she knew very little about their lives and concerns beyond their work responsibilities. The recognition made her feel slightly ashamed, highlighting the way professional hierarchies could create blind spots in human awareness and empathy. A text message from her father interrupted her reflections, explaining that he had been unable to reach their new partner by phone, but suggesting that perhaps there had been some confusion about the timing or location of their meeting. The message offered to reschedule for the following evening and apologized for any inconvenience. Isabella read the words with growing frustration, wondering how such a basic communication could have gone wrong and what it suggested about this person's organizational skills and attention to detail. She began typing a response that would express her disappointment diplomatically, while also making it clear that future meetings would need to be confirmed more carefully. As she searched for the right words, balancing honesty with professionalism, Isabella became aware of movement near the restaurant's entrance. A man in a well-tailored navy suit was speaking with the host, his posture suggesting both confidence and urgency as he gestured toward the dining room. Even from across the restaurant, something about his bearing struck Isabella as familiar, though she couldn't immediately place where she might have encountered him before. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was slightly disheveled, as if he had been rushing, and his face carried an expression of focused determination that reminded her of colleagues who were accustomed to handling multiple priorities simultaneously. The host led him toward the dining area, consulting a small, leather-bound book that contained the evening's reservations, and Isabella felt a sudden flutter of anticipation mixed with renewed irritation. If this was indeed her missing dinner companion, his arrival would at least provide answers to the evening's mysteries, though it would also require her to decide how directly to address the lateness that had characterized their first professional interaction. As the man approached her section of the restaurant, his eyes scanning the tables as if searching for someone specific, Isabella felt recognition dawn with shocking clarity. The familiar bearing she had noticed belonged to Mark Daniels, the night janitor from Foster & Associates, though his current appearance was so dramatically different from his usual work attire that she had to look twice to confirm the identification. Gone were the simple uniforms and practical shoes she associated with their brief hallway encounters over the past several months. Instead, he wore clothes that spoke of success and authority, the kind of ensemble she might expect to see on senior partners or successful clients. His transformation was so complete that it took her several moments to reconcile this elegant figure with the quiet, efficient man she had occasionally passed in the office corridors during her late-night work sessions. Mark's eyes found her table, and his expression shifted from searching uncertainty to something that might have been relief mixed with apprehension. He approached slowly, as if giving her time to process his unexpected appearance, and Isabella felt her mind racing to understand the connection between the building's janitor and her father's mysterious new business partner. The implications began to cascade through her thoughts like dominoes falling in sequence. If Mark Daniels was indeed the person she had been waiting to meet, then everything she thought she knew about this evening, about her father's business decisions, and about the nature of professional success itself, would need to be reconsidered. The quiet man who emptied waste baskets and vacuumed carpets after hours apparently possessed qualifications and experience that had impressed the senior partners enough to offer him a partnership position. Isabella's initial impulse was to assume some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. But Mark's confident approach and appropriate attire suggested otherwise. He carried himself with the bearing of someone who belonged in this environment, someone accustomed to business dinners and professional negotiations. The transformation was so complete that she wondered whether his janitorial work had been some kind of temporary arrangement, or perhaps a deliberate choice that concealed other ambitions and capabilities. As Mark reached her table, Isabella realized that her mouth was slightly open in surprise and quickly composed herself, drawing on years of professional training to maintain a neutral expression despite her internal confusion. The evening had already taken several unexpected turns, but this revelation threatened to upset all of her assumptions about professional hierarchies and the nature of success in the business world. Mark stopped beside her table and offered a slight smile that carried both apology and nervous anticipation. His presence filled the space between them with unspoken questions and possibilities, transforming what had been an increasingly frustrating evening into something entirely different. Isabella found herself studying his face, searching for clues about this transformation, and wondering how someone could move so seamlessly between such different worlds. The restaurant's ambient sounds seemed to fade into the background as they regarded each other across a gulf of surprise and uncertainty. Other diners continued their conversations and meals, unaware that a fundamental assumption about social and professional order was being challenged at table 12. For Isabella, the moment felt suspended between past understanding and future possibility, requiring her to choose how to respond to a situation that fell far outside her previous experience. Mark cleared his throat softly and asked whether he could sit down, his voice carrying the same quiet confidence she remembered from their brief workplace encounters, but somehow transformed by the context and his formal appearance. The question was simple, but Isabella sensed that her answer would set the tone for everything that followed, determining whether this evening would become a professional disaster or the beginning of something entirely unexpected. She gestured toward the empty chair, her movements automatic despite her racing thoughts, and watched as Mark settled himself across from her with the same careful attention to detail that had characterized his janitorial work. Even his posture spoke of transformation, the way he held his shoulders and positioned his hands suggesting someone accustomed to boardrooms and business negotiations rather than cleaning supplies and maintenance equipment. The server appeared almost immediately, as if she had been watching for this moment, and Mark ordered a glass of red wine with the kind of casual expertise that suggested familiarity with restaurant protocols and wine selections. His choice was thoughtful and complementary to Isabella's own selection, demonstrating knowledge that extended far beyond the practical skills she had associated with his previous role in their building. As the server departed to fulfill his order, an awkward silence settled over their table, filled with all the questions and explanations that neither of them seemed prepared to address directly. Isabella found herself torn between professional curiosity about his qualifications and personal bewilderment about the dramatic nature of his apparent transformation. The man sitting across from her bore little resemblance to the quiet figure she had occasionally encountered during late-night work sessions. Mark seemed to sense her confusion and began speaking in measured tones, explaining that the evening's lateness had resulted from a last-minute meeting with the senior partners to finalize the details of his new position. His words were careful and precise, suggesting someone accustomed to choosing language thoughtfully and Isabella found herself listening not just to what he was saying, but to how he was saying it, searching for clues about his background and qualifications. The explanation raised as many questions as it answered, particularly regarding how someone employed as a janitor had come to the attention of the firm's partners as a potential business associate. Mark seemed to recognize her unspoken questions and continued his explanation, revealing that his janitorial work had been a temporary arrangement while he completed requirements for professional licensing and waited for the right opportunity to transition back to his previous career in business consultation. Isabella absorbed this information slowly, trying to reconcile the humble figure she had known with the confident professional who now sat across from her. The revelation suggested a complexity and depth that she had failed to recognize during their previous encounters, raising uncomfortable questions about her own assumptions and perceptions. How many times had she passed him in the hallway without truly seeing him, dismissing him as part of the building's invisible infrastructure, rather than recognizing him as a fellow professional navigating his own career challenges? The server returned with Mark's wine, and he accepted it with a quiet thank you that carried the same genuine appreciation Isabella remembered from their workplace interactions. Even his courtesy seemed unchanged, suggesting that his character and values had remained consistent despite his dramatic change in circumstances and appearance. The observation was somehow reassuring, providing a point of continuity in an evening that had upended most of her expectations. Mark raised his glass slightly in what might have been a toast or simply an acknowledgement of the unusual nature of their meeting, and Isabella found herself responding instinctively, lifting her own wine in a gesture that felt both professionally appropriate and personally significant. The moment marked a transition from the confusion and frustration of the past hour to something that might evolve into genuine professional collaboration. As they both took thoughtful sips of their wine, Isabella became aware of the restaurant's atmosphere reasserting itself around them. The soft lighting and elegant surroundings that had felt oppressive during her solitary wait now seemed to embrace their conversation, providing an appropriate backdrop for the kind of business discussion she had originally anticipated. The transformation felt symbolic, reflecting the way her understanding of the evening and its possibilities had shifted with Mark's arrival and explanation. The conversation that followed unfolded gradually, with each of them sharing professional background and perspectives while carefully navigating the unusual circumstances of their introduction. Mark spoke about his experience in business development and strategic planning, describing projects and achievements that demonstrated genuine expertise and insight. His credentials were impressive, involving work with several major corporations and successful consultancy arrangements that had apparently caught the attention of Harrison Foster and his partners. Isabella found herself reassessing not only Mark's qualifications, but also her father's decision-making process and the firm's approach to identifying new talent. The willingness to look beyond conventional backgrounds and circumstances suggested a progressive attitude that she hadn't previously associated with the conservative culture of Foster and Associates. Perhaps the business world was more fluid and merit-based than she had realized, or perhaps her father was more forward-thinking than she had given him credit for. As Mark described his transition from corporate consulting to temporary janitorial work, Isabella began to understand the economic and personal factors that had influenced his career path. A consulting contract had ended unexpectedly due to client financial difficulties, leaving him with immediate income needs while he sought new opportunities and completed professional development requirements. The janitorial position had provided stability and flexibility while allowing him to continue his education and maintain his professional network. The explanation revealed a pragmatic approach to career management that Isabella found both admirable and humbling. Mark had been willing to take whatever honest work was available rather than compromise his long-term goals or exhaust his savings while waiting for the perfect opportunity. His perspective challenged some of Isabella's own assumptions about professional hierarchy and the relationship between temporary circumstances and personal worth. Their conversation moved naturally from professional backgrounds to broader discussions about business strategy and market opportunities. And Isabella discovered that Mark possessed insights and perspectives that complemented her own legal expertise. His experience with different industries and organizational structures provided valuable context for understanding client needs and market dynamics. The synergy between their different but related skill sets suggested genuine potential for successful collaboration. As the evening progressed, Isabella found herself relaxing into the discussion, allowing her initial surprise and confusion to give way to professional curiosity and growing respect. Mark's transformation from janitor to business partner no longer seemed impossible or inappropriate, but rather represented the kind of unconventional career path that might become increasingly common in a rapidly changing economy. His willingness to work from the bottom up while pursuing larger goals demonstrated exactly the kind of dedication and humility that successful partnerships required. The restaurant around them continued its elegant service, with servers refilling water glasses and bread plates with unobtrusive efficiency. But Isabella had stopped noticing their attention. Her focus had narrowed to encompass only the conversation at their table and the growing realization that this unexpected partnership might offer opportunities she hadn't previously considered. Mark's different background and perspective could provide exactly the fresh approach that Foster and Associates needed to expand its client base and service offerings. When Mark suggested that they order dinner and continue their discussion, Isabella agreed readily, realizing that her earlier frustration with his lateness had been completely replaced by genuine engagement with the possibilities their collaboration might create. The transformation of her attitude paralleled the transformation in Mark's circumstances, suggesting that first impressions and initial assumptions often provided incomplete or misleading information about people and situations. Their dinner choices reflected both their growing comfort with each other and their shared appreciation for the restaurant's sophisticated offerings. The conversation continued to flow naturally between professional topics and more personal reflections on career goals and business philosophy. Isabella discovered that Mark shared many of her concerns about maintaining professional integrity while pursuing financial success, and that his experience in different work environments had reinforced rather than undermined his commitment to ethical business practices. As they shared appetizers and discussed potential projects that might benefit from their combined expertise, Isabella began to envision a working relationship that could be both professionally rewarding and personally satisfying. Mark's approach to problem-solving was methodical and creative, complementing her own analytical skills and attention to legal detail. Their different backgrounds and perspectives created opportunities for innovative solutions to client challenges. The evening's earlier tension and uncertainty had given way to animated discussion about business opportunities and strategic possibilities. Isabella found herself contributing ideas and observations with growing enthusiasm, energized by Mark's thoughtful responses and his obvious respect for her expertise and judgment. The collaboration that had seemed impossible an hour earlier now felt not only feasible, but potentially transformative for both their careers. When Mark mentioned specific clients and projects that might benefit from legal consultation, Isabella recognized opportunities that aligned perfectly with her own professional interests and expertise. The potential for immediate collaboration was exciting, suggesting that their partnership could produce tangible results almost immediately, rather than requiring extended adjustment periods or trial arrangements. As the main course arrived, their conversation expanded to include broader discussions about professional development and career satisfaction. Isabella shared some of her own experiences with the challenges of working in a family business, while Mark described the lessons he had learned from navigating career transitions and unexpected opportunities. Their different paths had led to similar conclusions about the importance of adaptability and continuous learning in professional life. The restaurant's atmosphere had transformed around them from a backdrop for business networking to a setting for genuine professional and personal connection. Other diners continued their own conversations, but Isabella felt increasingly absorbed in the possibilities that Mark's partnership represented for her own career and the firm's future direction. The evening that had begun with frustration and confusion was evolving into something much more promising and significant. Mark's questions about the firm's current clients and strategic direction demonstrated both genuine interest and sophisticated understanding of business development challenges. His suggestions for expanding service offerings and improving client relationships showed creative thinking that was grounded in practical experience. Isabella found herself taking mental notes about ideas that deserved further exploration and development. As they discussed potential approaches to client development and service delivery, Isabella became aware of how naturally their different perspectives complemented each other. Mark's consulting background provided insights into client expectations and market trends, while her legal training offered frameworks for managing risk and ensuring compliance. The combination created opportunities for comprehensive service offerings that could differentiate Foster and Associates from competitors. The conversation revealed that both of them shared concerns about maintaining work-life balance while pursuing professional excellence. Mark described his efforts to continue learning and growing professionally while managing the practical demands of supporting himself during career transitions. Isabella talked about her struggle to develop meaningful personal relationships while meeting the demanding expectations of legal practice and family business responsibilities. Their shared commitment to professional development and personal growth created another point of connection, suggesting that their partnership might offer mutual support for achieving both career goals and broader life satisfaction. The possibility of working with someone who understood the challenges of balancing ambition with other values was appealing and somewhat rare in Isabella's experience. As the dinner progressed, Isabella found herself genuinely enjoying Mark's company in ways that extended beyond purely professional considerations. His sense of humor was subtle and appropriate, emerging through gentle observations about business culture and human nature that revealed both intelligence and perspective. The combination of professional competence and personal appeal made the prospect of extended collaboration increasingly attractive. When the server inquired about dessert, both Isabella and Mark agreed to continue the evening, neither seeming ready to conclude a conversation that was proving both productive and unexpectedly enjoyable. The decision felt natural and comfortable, reflecting the ease that had developed between them despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting and the dramatic revelations about Mark's background and new position. The dessert course provided an opportunity for more relaxed conversation about personal interests and experiences outside the business world. Isabella learned that Mark was passionate about urban development and community improvement, interests that aligned with some of the pro bono work she had been considering. The discovery of shared values and concerns created additional possibilities for collaboration that extended beyond immediate business opportunities. Mark's commitment to community service and social responsibility impressed Isabella and challenged some of her assumptions about the relationship between business success and civic engagement. His experience working in different economic circumstances had apparently strengthened rather than weakened his commitment to using professional success to benefit others. The perspective was refreshing and inspiring, suggesting approaches to legal practice that Isabella had considered but never fully pursued. As the evening drew toward its conclusion, Isabella reflected on how dramatically her understanding of both Mark and their potential partnership had evolved over the course of a few hours. The frustration and confusion of his delayed arrival had given way to genuine excitement about the possibilities their collaboration might create. The transformation felt symbolic of larger lessons about patience, open-mindedness, and the danger of premature judgments. When Mark suggested that they schedule follow-up meetings to develop specific project plans and partnership structures, Isabella agreed enthusiastically, recognizing that their initial dinner had established a foundation for productive working relationships. The practical next steps felt like natural extensions of the evening's successful introduction, confirming that their compatibility extended beyond surface-level politeness to substantial professional alignment. The restaurant staff began the subtle preparations that indicated the establishment's approaching closing time, dimming lights slightly and attending to the details that would prepare the space for tomorrow's service. Isabella and Mark seemed to recognize simultaneously that their dinner had reached its natural conclusion, though both appeared reluctant to end a conversation that had proved so engaging and productive. As they prepared to leave, Mark insisted on handling the dinner check, explaining that the firm's partnership agreement included provisions for business entertainment expenses. The gesture was both practically appropriate and personally thoughtful, demonstrating the kind of consideration and professionalism that suggested their future collaborations would be conducted with mutual respect and attention to detail. The walk to the restaurant's entrance felt comfortable and natural, with their conversation continuing to flow easily between professional topics and more general observations about the city and their shared experiences. The transition from dinner companions to business partners seemed to be occurring organically, without the awkwardness or uncertainty that might have characterized such an unusual introduction under different circumstances. Outside the restaurant, the autumn evening had turned crisp and clear, with downtown Detroit's lights creating a backdrop of urban energy and possibility. Isabella felt energized by both the cool air and the prospects that the evening's revelations had created for her professional future. The partnership with Mark represented opportunities for growth and challenge that she hadn't anticipated when the evening began. As they stood on the sidewalk preparing to part ways, Mark thanked Isabella for her patience with the evening's delayed start and expressed genuine enthusiasm about their upcoming collaboration. His appreciation felt sincere and appropriate, acknowledging both the inconvenience his lateness had caused and the positive direction their conversation had taken, despite the unpromising beginning. Isabella found herself responding with equal warmth and optimism, recognizing that the evening's initial frustrations had ultimately led to discoveries and possibilities that might not have emerged under more conventional circumstances. The unexpected nature of their introduction had created opportunities for authentic conversation and genuine connection that formal business meetings sometimes failed to achieve. When Mark suggested that they exchange contact information and schedule their next meeting within the following week, Isabella agreed readily, feeling confident that their partnership would prove both professionally rewarding and personally satisfying. The practical arrangements felt like natural extensions of the positive momentum they had established during dinner, confirming that their initial connection could translate into productive ongoing collaboration. As they prepared to go their separate ways, Isabella realized that the evening had transformed not only her understanding of Mark and their partnership, but also her perspective on professional relationships and career possibilities more generally. The experience had challenged assumptions and opened possibilities that she might not have considered under different circumstances, suggesting that unexpected opportunities often came disguised as problems or inconveniences. The drive home through Detroit's quiet streets provided time for reflection on the evening's revelations and their implications for Isabella's future with Foster and Associates. The partnership with Mark represented exactly the kind of fresh perspective and innovative thinking that could help the firm expand its capabilities and reach new markets. The combination of his consulting experience and her legal expertise created opportunities for comprehensive service offerings that could differentiate them from competitors while providing genuine value to clients. More personally, the evening had reminded Isabella of the satisfaction that came from genuine professional collaboration with someone who shared her values and commitment to excellence. The prospect of working closely with Mark on challenging projects was energizing in ways that her recent work had not been, suggesting that the partnership might provide not only career advancement but also renewed enthusiasm for the practice of law. As she pulled into her driveway and prepared to conclude the evening, Isabella felt grateful for the patience and open-mindedness that had allowed her to move beyond initial frustration to discover the possibilities that Mark's partnership represented. The experience reinforced lessons about the importance of withholding judgment and remaining open to unexpected opportunities, even when they arrived in forms that challenged existing assumptions and expectations. The house felt quiet and peaceful after the energy and stimulation of the evening's conversations, providing a perfect environment for processing the dramatic changes that a single dinner had introduced into her professional life. Isabella poured herself a glass of water and settled into her favorite chair, still wearing the business attire that had seemed so appropriate for meeting a mysterious new partner, but now felt like costume from an earlier act in an ongoing drama. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father, inquiring about the evening's success and expressing hope that she had been favorably impressed by their new associate. Isabella smiled as she composed her response, realizing that her father's enthusiasm now made perfect sense, and that his judgment about Mark's potential contributions had been entirely justified. The brief message she sent conveyed both her positive impressions and her anticipation for future collaboration, though she suspected that the full story of the evening's revelations would require a longer conversation. The evening's unexpected developments had created a sense of anticipation and possibility that Isabella hadn't experienced in her professional life for several years. The combination of Mark's impressive qualifications, their obvious compatibility, and the innovative opportunities their partnership might create suggested that her career was about to enter a new and potentially transformative phase. As she prepared for bed, Isabella reflected on the lessons the evening had provided about assumptions, patience, and the complex relationship between circumstances and character. Mark's transformation from janitor to business partner challenged conventional thinking about professional hierarchies and career paths, while his consistent character and values demonstrated that personal integrity transcended temporary circumstances and external appearances. The partnership that had seemed so mysterious and potentially problematic at the beginning of the evening now felt like an exciting opportunity for professional growth and personal fulfillment. The unexpected nature of Mark's background and qualifications had initially been disorienting, but ultimately provided exactly the kind of fresh perspective and innovative thinking that Foster and Associates needed to thrive in an increasingly competitive market. Sleep came easily that night, filled with dreams of successful collaborations and challenging projects that combined legal expertise with business innovation. The evening's revelations had opened possibilities that extended far beyond immediate professional opportunities, suggesting that the partnership with Mark might influence not only Isabella's career trajectory, but also her broader understanding of success, collaboration, and the interconnected nature of professional and personal fulfillment.